in the Benedictine church where spiritually I grew up, my parish, which was also priory, the prior had made for the new chapel where he wanted the Holy Sacrifice celebrated on weekdays so as to have us all together, and where eventually he put the Blessed Sacrament, although since it has actually gone back to the high altar, I understand. He had carved on the new ambo, tolle, legge. These were the words which the confused young Augustine heard when he was torn to shreds between passion and faith. An angel or a child or some voice emitted this word from the garden just next to where he was. Tolle legge, tolle legge. Take up, read. Take up, read. So he fumbled for the nearest thing next to him, and what was it but a codex of the Apostle Paul, what we have just read. Walk in the Spirit, and you will not fulfill the lusts of the flesh. In other words, repose on the strength that comes from on high, and the rest will sort itself out, because he didn't think it was possible to live without his passions. You know the story. The result was that he eventually, with friends of his, shared a philosophical life, and one day they were discussing amongst themselves. Two young soldiers had heard a call after being struck by the life of St. Athanasius and the Desert Fathers. You know that the life of St. Anthony, the first monk, comes from the pen of Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, and that this went round the world like wildfire, translated immediately into Latin, and was able to draw by the 100 young souls into the desert. Well, these two young soldiers were puzzled. They felt that they could do more with their life, and they went in that direction. And Augustine, talking to his friends, said, "Look how these simple people have got it right, whereas we, with all our philosophy, are fumbling in the dark." The result was that he entered into this game of contemplative existence, and that philosophical friendship became sacred, and they lived together initially as young intellectuals without anything but the Word. Eventually, you know the story, he found himself in a place where a bishop suddenly died, and he was pressed into becoming a bishop. So Hippo had one of the greatest bishops of all time, and these friends, of course, were attracted to him like they would be to a magnet. So this continued, and we have as a result the essence of the model of what I would propose to you and to all those who are taking the interior life seriously. All action, all word, all that we do coming from precisely the encounter. Now, do you see how fundamentally different that is from what we observe in our day? We go about the Lord's business as we were going about some great entreprise. We sit down at a table and we tell the Lord this is the way that he's going to act. Well, this way was quite different. And the result was that these people who came to live with this magnet were, after a while, so rich in intimacy with the Lord and in true knowledge, true theology, that they were able to go out of that place of formation like torpedoes from a submarine. and be directed in all the little churches of North Africa as future bishops. Compare the situation in certain seminaries, where they come out with lots and lots of experience of pastoral work and human dynamics and psychology and all the latest in gadgets and thoughts and techniques, and very little fruit, because it's starting from the other end and inviting the Lord to follow. Down the line, we have another young man, about 19 years of age, in Rome. Good young man. He was there actually with his nurse, who was looking after his physical needs. And he was pulled by grace, not because he was corrupt, but because others were. He was a holy boy, and he fled all this contagion and ended up under the lake, sub lacu in Latin, subiaco in Italian. What happened there? No one knew where he was except one monk, Romanus, who would lower his daily bread down on a cord, and on this cord there was a little bell, and when the bell rang, as he would tug on the cord, St. Benedict, of whom I'm speaking, would know that his food was there. Eventually, after 3 years, word got round that there was a holy monk there. But those 3 years formed the whole of Europe, because God worked on the heart of that man as he did in Augustine who had formed him, because St. Benedict used Augustine's rule, the proof. Let the oratory be what it is called, straight from St. Augustine and found in the rule of St. Benedict, and so on. What happened there? God, in his providence, gave a model through what was understood in those 3 years where God alone was the interior master without any human channel. And all that was learned was put into the present rule of St. Benedict, which then formed armies and armies of people on the same track unto glory, who then, for the same reasons, were able to do the kind of thing that was happening in that little parish in Cardiff. Men in love with God, able to bring with them, not into human dynamics, but into prayer, where a parish is vibrant with God and not man. In our day, my friends, we are in a situation where it is extremely difficult for God to be our interior master and to have that same impact and effect. Why? If we observe our existence, a high proportion of our own interiority is in a state of prostitution. We are plugged in to other people's noise and contamination and thought patterns. Wherever you go, you are exposed to other people's words being pumped at you through artificial means. You are not in control of your interior sphere unless you become aware of it and create that isolation, which leads me to the point I want to make, which is linked precisely with two things. The first reading talks about all this stuff which is the consequence of the flesh. The list is there, you can read it again if you want to, but it's very modern. The other is what the Lord says. We cannot have two masters. Now this business of doing all we can on earth to make our existence function, that's actually what's happening massively on this planet, if you look around. All the energy of man goes into the material unless we are careful. Even ours, observe in practice, how much energy goes into the material. And we are spiritual and divine, and we are getting into the level of the material. The Lord is telling us in this gospel, make a break. I am big enough to handle the universe. What I want of you is your attention. Honor me, and I will honor you. So I leave you with that, my friends. But I will just take you for a few seconds before I do so to just a physical reminder. It's something actually that happened to me when a young man looking for a monastery, and somebody told me to go to a monastery on an island. I was still in college in those days, and off I went, and I found a monastery on an island. Now, when I got there, I was impressed. But then I was to live in community, and what did I find? In the element of manual work, which is a big proportion of their day, what was going on? They were talking! And I thought to myself, what's the point? The whole thing of living the divine life on earth has its rules, and even as a student I could pick out, there's something wrong here. One cannot talk to God and man. It's the same on the spiritual level. Either it's coherent or it's not. And what did I find on a Sunday? The goggle box, blasting full pelt, football on a Sunday. What's the point of leaving all, going into the monastery to find not less but more of the noise of the world in the heart of the cloister? I said, what's the point? But it's quite subtle, my friends. I thought to myself, what of the islands of old? And what of this monastery of old, which had an old monastic tradition, going back to Celtic times actually? And I thought of the difference. Look at this. This is your route in Ireland. You can't actually see it very well, but it's well known. It's Skellig Michael, the big island amongst the Skelligs, which has those beehive cells, which are still standing. And just think of the silence and solitude in one of those beehive cells compared with what? All our noise, morning until night. It's the choice that we make, my friends, while on earth. But believe you me, there's a huge difference between in control of your thought and being in control of all that's coming out of other people and handling all their problems because we're bombarded without being able to filter. So the choice is ours. And I insist, my friends, it's more subtle than you think. Think twice before going into internet, because internet has to be handled in complete maturity and control. Every time you open it, remember, you've got time in your hands, you've got contact with other people's contaminated souls, you've got contact eventually with Satan through all the porno that's out there. Be careful, it's not just neutral, it's on the brink between hell and neutrality. So just be careful, my friends, because just like that, in 1 second, you can be plugged into the worst porno on earth just by making a mistake. Protect yourselves, because it's all the modern version of what we've just read.